Hello, everybody, and welcome to this new panel on Co-Cities, the Strength of Collective Intelligence. Hello, everybody. You need to wake up. We have an amazing panel and session ahead of us. My name is Mara Balestrini. I'm the CEO of Ideas for Change. And for many years now, I have been working on co-creation for smart city services and products and interventions. And I'm very, very happy that I've been invited to chair this thematic session. So basically, what is going to happen here today? We're going to have two keynotes where are different topics around co-creation, bringing citizens forward in the planning and the creation of our cities are going to be discussed. After that, we'll have a networking break. You make the most out of that. And after that, we're going to have an amazing panel with 4 speakers where we are going to share different ideas coming from academia, public sector, private sector, on how to bring citizens into the mix, how we deal with data, how we deal with co-creation tools, co-design, et cetera, et cetera. So co-creation is something that can be now seen as a bit of a buzzword. It's increasingly being used in everything around smart cities. But the truth is that we're talking about a methodology that has existed for over 30 years and that basically is looking at how to bring citizens at the heart of any design process, how to bring design into the mix, how we can think and design our cities with citizens at heart. This sounds great, but it's easier said than done. Any of you working in private companies or with civic organizations or at the city council level know how hard it is to enable these collaborations. In nature, co-creation is open-ended. You don't know how a process will end because you open the door for bottom-up innovation. However, at the city council and at companies, we're much more used to knowing exactly what is going to happen and planning accordingly. So how do we bring those things together? How do you really bring the voice of citizens without just carrying over populist strategies? And how do you make the most out of collective intelligence to create more democratic and more resilient cities? Hopefully, we're going to hear more about this in the coming keynotes. Let me introduce our first keynote speaker, which is Cecilia Del Re. She was born in Florence, and she is a lawyer. She also has a PhD in law. She was elected in 2014 in the City Council of Florence, and then she has been nominated Deputy Mayor for the Economic Activities in 2017. At the 2019 election, she has been confirmed Deputy Mayor for Urban Planning, Environment, Tourism, and Innovation. So let's give a warm welcome to Cecilia Del Re. Thank you.
Good morning to everybody. I'm Cecilia Del Re, the Deputy Mayor for Urban Planning, Environment, Tourism, and Innovation of the City of Florence. The story of participatory method and democracy of our city is ancient. Girolamo Savonarola ordered the creation of the Council of the 500, or Major Council, made up of 500 citizens precisely, so that the decision-making power on the population was spread, making it more difficult to control by a single. The tangible result of this reform was the creation of the Hall of 500 in our old palace in the government building. It was that in the 1495. Tuscany regions is one of the most active regions on the theme of participation, and the first region in Italy in 2013 to have issued a law just on this theme. More than 50 projects have been funded over the 3 past years, and 1 million have been invested on this project. It's above all the cities that want to make participatory paths involving citizens, more than just single associations or enterprises. For the methodology, we use the systems thinking methodology. Systems thinking methodology is a way of creating a shared understanding of how something works by outlining the function of its interdependent parts. That something could be a bat, a rainforest, Earth's climate, city traffic, or a business. The idea is that all things are interdependent. So if you change something, you never just change that one single thing. The change you make makes change of its own. And many times citizens don't consider that. So it's very difficult to work out what's going to happen when you make a change. People are different, topics are different, and the way to face the topic are different. For this reason, city needs to involve the people, to engage them, and to work together in order to take the best decision. And in Florence, we are experimenting the listening marathons. In the listening marathons, we gather people and we listen to their needs, to their proposal, in order to take some decision. For example, we did this in order to choose the final destination of Piazza dei Ciompi. We had to decide if we need to maintain the old market in this square, or otherwise if to create a new garden in that square. This is an important topic for the city of Florence, since the city center is full of tourists, and so we need to create more urban space for the citizens, for our residents. At the end, we choose to have a new garden in the square, and we build a new market in the square next to Piazza dei Ciompi. A collaborative city means also to have and to grow an active citizenship. And a real joint venture and a particular experience that we have in Florence is that one of the Angeli del Bello Association, so Beauties Angels Association. This association was founded by the municipality in 2010. It's a group of citizens who voluntarily take care of the city garden or who clean the walls, removing rights. And if you go on their website, you can find day by day where they are, what they do, and so you can join them anytime. So everyone, from Florence or not, can be a beauty of angel, and everyone can cooperate in order to have a better cities. It's also a way to make new friendship, to share time with other people, and to live our public gardens that are a beautiful part of our city. As Elio Vittorini, one of our most famous poets, says, the more the city is beautiful, the more beautiful the people are, as if the air were better then. Just in these weeks, we are also working in order to co-create cities. We are working in order to have a greener cities. In the next 5 years, we want to plant 15,000 of trees in our city out of 80,000 of trees that we have today. So we want to arrive to have 95,000 of trees in the next 5 years. In order to reach this aim, we are asking to our citizens, but also to our tourists, if they want to donate trees to the city. And in doing that, they can do a gift for the environment, but they can also do a gift for the person they love. If you will visit our website in the next week, just the next week, the website of the municipality, you will find a map where you can choose the place where you want to plant the tree, and then you can donate it, so by a payment, and then you can also make a message and a dedication to a person you love. Then we will plant the tree, and we will put a tag on the tree with the name the person you love. By the website, you could follow how the tree grows, and so you can participate with us in order to have a greener cities in the next years. Florence is also the city of data. Florence is one of the first cities of Italy in gathering open data and in the use of open data. Thanks to the help of citizen association, we have crowd-mapped public space, city public space. So we have mapped together where we can have free public space, and we also listened to their proposal in order to have new public space and where we can find new public space. Another interesting project is about city accessibility. Thanks to the user of the Key Map app, that is an app promoted by the municipality of Florence, we mapped the city accessibility, so the paths, the street, the sidewalk, in order to let people with disability to know which is the best way to reach the final destination. That's the city of today. That's the city of tomorrow. No one left behind. As our measure always says, deciding without listening is high-handedness. Listening without deciding is powerlessness. Thanks for your attention. If you have any question, I'm here.
So I have a question. You have presented a number of examples where you are looking at engaging with citizens at the very one-to-one level. And it seems like also you're bringing conversation forward beyond the use of technology. Where does this approach come from? And so far, what are the sort of examples of good practice that you can describe in this area?
We trust in the collaboration of our citizens, and so we trust in our citizens. That is the basis for doing all these things. So we trust that they can take care of our gardens. We trust that they can help us in order to have a greener cities. We trust they can think with us to new public spaces. So these are really a concrete project where we work together and where the municipality made something not just by its own, but with the collaboration of citizens. So in some of these, as you saw, we use the technology, but the technology must be at the service of citizens. And we always take in mind these premises in all the projects that we carry on.
Brilliant, thank you. Questions? Nobody's going to take this amazing opportunity to ask Cecilia Del Re a question about how they're implementing co-creation in the city of Florence? People are still shy. It's very early in the morning here in Barcelona. Well, okay. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's give a warm applause to Cecilia. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Cecilia has talked about the power of one of the oldest technologies that we have, which is conversation, and he has also talked about trust. And this opens the door perfectly for our second keynote speaker, Patricia Purcell. She's with UN Global Compact. She's a senior strategist and advisor. She was coming from Copenhagen, but now I learned that she's based in Barcelona. Patricia brings over 15 years of experience in the public and private sectors, leading global sustainability initiatives. She most recently served as a senior strategist advisor to the UN Global Compact and previously a senior advisor to the executive director of UN Habitat based in Nairobi. She holds advanced degrees in public policy with a focus on the intersection between urbanization, climate change, and inequality. I am very happy for this keynote because Patricia will be talking about the future of partnerships and how partnerships are so important to scaling up co-creation and environmental efforts. So welcome, Patricia. We're looking forward to hearing this. Thank you.
Good morning, bon dia. First, please allow me to thank Fira Barcelona, the City of Barcelona, and all of the people who have made this great event possible for inviting me to be here today. It's a great honor to have this opportunity to participate and interact with all of you, such a group of smart people. My name is Patricia Purcell, and I've spent the better part of my career working on issues that impact the sustainability and prosperity of cities. As you just heard, for the past 8 years, this has been at the United Nations, most previously for the UN Global Compact, and prior to that, for the United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat in Nairobi. But today, I am not going to talk about the United Nations, and many of you will thank me for that later, I'm sure. But I'm also not going to talk about smart cities, at least not in the conventional context. All of you here today have your own understanding of what makes a smart city. Perhaps the best way to capture this is one in which a city is sustainable, resilient, and livable. Whether it's harnessing technology to foster more equity and inclusion, or improve air quality and mobility, or confront climate change, this room is full of ideas, expertise, and solutions to make cities smarter. So what I'm going to talk to today is about what's missing, or rather, who's missing. Here I want to pick up on 3 key questions that were raised during a panel in which I participated yesterday, hosted by MasterCard. The first was how to define a city of dreams. The second was how to make that dream a reality. And the third, and perhaps most critical, was how do we utilize platforms like Smart Cities Barcelona to drive more collaboration and innovation. Everyone here, everyone in this room, is looking for something or someone or both. That person might be sitting right next to you, or 2 rows behind you, or 2 rows in front of you. Go ahead, I'll wait, look around. The point is that if we want to create smart cities, then we need to start getting to know each other better. And not just those sitting in this room, or in this venue, or even in this city, but those who you haven't even met yet. And I don't mean through social media. I'll come back to that. I mean we need real connections between real people. We need curated discussions that enable thoughtful communications and generate real solutions to real problems that are transferable, scalable, and impactful. Today, there is an extraordinary level of discourse on the focus and concept and importance of collaboration. At a global level, the UN makes great strides in bringing together the inputs of various stakeholders, from business, local governments, civil society, and others, to make progress on the world's most pressing problems. But I promised I wouldn't talk about the UN, so don't worry. There are myriad other regional, local platforms such as these aimed at doing just that, with new ecosystems of solution providers evolving almost daily who are committed to the broad concept of sustainable development, be it in terms of empowering women-led businesses or deploying the next generation of smart infrastructure. But if we want to solve big existential challenges facing the world like climate change, then we need to find new and more effective ways to scale these great efforts and bring like-minded people from all walks of life to work and socialize together. And when I say all, I mean all. We need different perspectives that cross disciplines and social, geographic, cultural, and ethnic boundaries. This means tapping into and critically blending the insights, experience, expertise of artists, scientists, business, technologists, musicians, actors, poets, philanthropists, philosophers, diplomats, entrepreneurs, and others. Most urgently, we need a convergence of thought. We need a genuine collaboration, which is directed towards a common goal, one that enables a structural change that leaps over pre-existing boundaries and erases preconceptions. We need a platform for this convergence that delivers real solutions in real time. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we are running out of time. I don't need to tell anyone here that cities are dynamic incubators of creativity and prosperity, and now home, of course, to over half the world's population and growing. According to LSE's cities research, about 32 people every hour, day and night, are moving to Shanghai. 39 are moving to Kinshasa and Jakarta. 42 into Mumbai and Karachi, and 58 into Lagos. With this massive, often unplanned expansion, I also don't need to tell you that cities everywhere are threatened by the impacts of climate change, rising levels of inequality, and in recent years, popularist movements that are tearing at the very fabric of cities' democratic legacy. 2,500 years ago, newly elected public servants in the world's first democracy, Athens, swore an oath on taking office to leave this city no less but greater, better, and more beautiful than it was left to us. That enduring principle remains as valid as ever for city leaders across the world. The threat of climate change means that their success will be measured not just between the day they were elected and the day that they leave office, but on how their legacy affects the lives of several future generations. But it's not just city leaders that bear this responsibility. It's up to all of us. It is a collective responsibility. The good news is that because so many cities share common challenges means they can also share the solutions to these challenges. Many of these solutions exist right now. They are just not being directed or deployed in a way that touches enough cities and people fast enough. Of course, there are barriers to the enabling environment that would enable this deployment, such as insufficient governance and so on, that otherwise would enable such solution investments to be unlocked and transferred widely. But ladies and gentlemen, we cannot wait for a perfect enabling environment to solve existential challenges like climate change. Instead, we need to bring more people together who rarely or even never interact to create new pathways that overcome existing barriers, bridge knowledge gaps, and transfer the solutions and resources that we do have and which will beget further advancements. In a former life, I was a business and financial journalist, so I take a very pragmatic view of how visions can stop being just visions and start making transformation and impact. Earlier this year, I helped co-launch an expert group on investing in the Sustainable Development Goals at city level with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, better known as OECD. I was told not to use acronyms, so I'm spelling out everything, lest I get in trouble. Today, this group includes over 30 different organizations and perspectives. They range from the United Nations, the European Commission, to individual thought leaders, fund managers, and city networks. Our mission, broadly, is to correct the mismatch in priorities between these groups and overcome barriers to the actual implementation of good ideas to create shared value and impact. Over the coming months, one concrete way that we will do this is through the development of a city-level investor prospectus. Broadly speaking, this will translate a selection of cities' sustainable development plans and climate action plans into the language of investors who are also missing from the room, and all too often from many of the rooms in which we participate. This brings me back to the need for a platform for collective thought and action that makes ambitious global frameworks like the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Change Agreement a reality for all people. To build smart cities, we need a platform for all. We need a truly global exchange. This thought was inspired many years ago by a violinist playing on a sunny day as I was walking through a park in Rome. That day, two things occurred to me. First, how fortunate I was to have access to such a beautiful public space, and in an amazing city, which, for the most part, things work. My Italian friends in the audience will appreciate that. The second thing that struck me was how I imagined that violinist had studied, how long he had had to practice, all the people he must have also touched as they walked through that park and elsewhere that he played, and how much he had to offer those who were not as fortunate as I was to be in the park on that day. What if that violinist spent a day or a month with all of us policy wonks? What could he teach us? What insights could he share that could better shape our own thought processes and critically outcomes? Earlier this year, this thought started to take shape. I'm now working on such a platform aimed at building a collective of thought and action towards a common goal and purpose. It is still in its early days, but put simply, the exchange is a mission-driven global network. Thank you. It is a platform designed to drive social and data-driven interactions, both online and offline, in order to expand and accelerate the scale and pace of collaboration, as well as recognize that if we are to deliver our collective action or city of dreams, it requires all of us to be inspired together today. Let me give you a practical example of how this, we hope, will work. As you heard, I lived in Nairobi for many years. In my time there, I saw a massive transformation of the city's transport networks, with new railways and highways being built at lightning speed. I also spent many years living in London, which has undergone a similar transformation. On its surface, all this new infrastructure designed to improve congestion, pollution, safety, and so on, are all signs of what a smart city should be pursuing. But in both cases, there have been unintended consequences. For Nairobi, one of these was the fact that many people who relied on the old networks by hawking fruits and other goods on the side of the road found they were suddenly disconnected from their customers. More, they were also disconnected from their homes since the major new superhighways didn't facilitate enough crosswalks for pedestrians. Now, anyone who's spent time in Nairobi, or indeed in most cities in Africa, know that a lot of people still walk. So this created a higher risk of accidents and a loss to many people's livelihoods, at least in the immediate term. Likewise, in London, well-intended traffic improvements aimed at encouraging more public transit use have actually caused more congestion in some areas and wreaked havoc for many of the city's legendary black cabbies. Now, I'm not suggesting a violinist could have anticipated these unintended consequences, but I am suggesting that we do need more effective platforms to convene different perspectives and areas of expertise that will deliver common solutions to the common challenges that mostly all cities face, so that we can, as best we can, avoid such unintended consequences. But more than that, inspire new solutions that we and our own circles may not have even conceived of. Critically, such a platform must bridge the analog and digital worlds. The other day, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a grade school teacher. She told me that the problem for kids nowadays, and we all love that expression, don't we, for those who have kids in the room, is not now their screen time on their laptops or their smartphones, but rather reinstalling communication skills and collectiveness, the loss of which has also had unintended consequences. But this is not just a challenge for young people. It's a challenge for all of us. Our current social platforms are not bringing enough people together further enough or fast enough. In fact, too often, they are reinforcing silos rather than breaking them. You may have read that Google's former CEO, Eric Schmidt, and his wife, Wendy, just announced a $1 billion philanthropic commitment to identify, develop, and support young people from around the world across disciplines to build a global network of the best ideas from that group that can scale. The fundamental idea of this effort is you don't need to invent everything yourself. Instead, you need to link yourself to other people. You need to create a system where everyone can participate. Bringing people together does make a difference, as evidenced by all of you here in this room and all of those attending this great event. Thing is that the solutions we need are mostly right there, just within reach. They remain elusive only because we haven't yet brought enough people together under a deliberate and common purpose of exchange. So with that in mind, and in closing, my city of dreams is a place created by all people and for all people. I congratulate Smart Cities Barcelona for its efforts to do just this and to fill gaps that I've just observed. And in the interest of collaboration, I invite all of you to be part of the exchange. Muchas gracias.
going to keep you on stage because we have a few minutes to ask questions. We have Francis Pisani here ready to ask a question. Do we have a microphone? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your intervention. You mentioned, it was written behind you, that you wanted to bring like-minded people to solve the biggest existential challenges facing the world. Two questions. How do you see the importance of diversity, meaning people who don't think the same thing? And second question, do you suggest a special technique to help people with opposite position to have a productive conversation, which seems to me to be a higher challenge?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sorry, am I still on? Yeah. Should I answer one at a time?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
please.
okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so yes, I totally agree with you. Yes. Well, the whole idea of the exchange, as I said, is to in fact bring diverse groups together, right? People from different backgrounds. But I think to your point, I don't think anyone disagrees that they don't want to live in a clean, safe, healthy environment. All of the sort of the things that we want, right? Access to good education, healthcare. So I think there's enough common intent of good for all of us, regardless of our backgrounds, ethnic, cultural, sectorally or otherwise. But there is a gap in bringing those different voices together and those different areas of expertise. And I think what the exchange wants to do is try to tap into new insights that are focused on what everyone really believes is a common good. But to your excellent point also about creating a space for debate, yes, I do believe that, as I indicated, that current social media channels, which are overtaking our analog in-person interactions, are not allowing for that. In fact, they're shepherding people more into tracks of thought and not, in fact, allowing for greater discourse and indeed reinforcing silos. And so what our hope is with this project is that by creating a new, more diverse platform that also is very much grounded in a offline conversation, that we will help address the very important issues that you just raised. Thank you.
Thank you. So, are there any other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Patricia, for that very enlightening talk. So my question is just, so how far along are you with developing this platform? Do you have a timeline? And also, in a practical sense, how will the platform work? So how does everyone in this room engage with the platform?
Yeah. Thank you. So as I mentioned, I mean, we're just getting started, so it's a work in progress. But the plan is to hopefully have a prototype of some sort up and running by early new year. I mentioned earlier that investors are also missing from the room. If you are an investor, please let's do talk, because that will be one of the things that helps make this project a reality. We're also looking for insights from other experts, because again, that's the goal of the exchange. So I really was genuine when I invited all of you to please consider how you might participate and be actively involved in sharing your thoughts and ideas on how this could work. But very concretely, I mean, the timeline is really starting in earnest in the new year. The way that the online version, if you will, needs to be developed. As I said, the offline version, I think we're a bit further along. I've connected with a partner who actually has his goal is to have offline clubs, if you will, or sites that actually have a focus, like on climate change, for example. So these people that are coming together, to participate in, these types of social clubs, or even events like this, how can we tap into those? The reason that those people come together in those types of fora. Why do you choose to be part of a venue or or a club or a space, that has a sort of overarching theme of, trying to tackle climate change. Clearly, something has attracted those people to that place. So, from the analog perspective, we're trying to identify, those people and work with that group and community of people. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? If you don't ask questions, you run the risk of me coming closer to you. I'm kidding.
Good morning, Patricia. Thank you for the talk again.
Thank you.
I would love to hear your thoughts on platforms such as Facebook or Twitter and the information exchange that is going on these platforms, especially when it comes to the voices that are heard and the disinformation that is spread on platforms such as these for example, political gains, and how you would like to have this information exchange regulated on platforms such as these.
Yeah. So, first thing to say is I now absolutely have no doubt that whatever I say from here on in will go on Facebook and Twitter, so I better be careful. But I definitely think I implied, the challenges that we heard previously and what you're raising right now. What I think about, these platforms, they came upon us, didn't they? And they completely changed everything. They changed the way that we consume media. They changed the way that we understand or think we understand, the world. What was meant as, sort of to expand our minds, is often sort of tended to close them. And that's manifested itself in some, very difficult political situations that we see across the world. Also, one thing I critically missed in my remarks is, we still face a digital divide. Many people still don't even have access to, the internet, or not regular or affordable access in both developed and developing countries. I mean, look at what Elon Musk just did, launching all these satellites, right, to try to provide, free Wi-Fi for all. These are the types of, great transformations and leaps that we need to make. And I think that once we do, and once we find a way to facilitate these connections, but critically, again, importantly, that, they are balanced with offline communication, real talking, which we maybe have forgotten how to do, and which are so important, which is why I answered the other gentleman's question about, tapping into some established venues and clubs that people already belong to, that where they really feel a shared purpose. I think these types of leaps in our digital communication, balanced with a focus offline communication, will help address many of these challenges. I mean, that is definitely the goal of the exchange. And I mean, coming from a sort of a development and humanitarian background, I think, that these well-intentioned, cool technologies like Facebook and Twitter, I'm sure they were never conceived as they were in the dorm rooms of these young people, to be like, political tools, right? They were never really conceived to be used for, voting, or, I mean, if they were, fine, but, think about the level of responsibility that exists now as a result, right? And I think all of us who move forward as this next leap in technology and communication occurs need to be much more cognizant, and not just cognizant, but squarely focused on recognizing that responsibility and ensuring it, and critically ensuring the inclusivity of how we all deploy that responsibility. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Are you all in your little bubbles of internet connectivity, or here? No? Well, if there are no other questions, I just suggest we give Patricia a warm applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So I think it is a symptom of maturity of this smart city community that we have gone from over a decade talking about augmented reality and massive technologies and connectivity and so on to 2019 talking about the power and the value of conversation. And going back to the realization that technology alone will not solve all our problems. We are facing systemic challenges that require large-scale orchestration of efforts of citizens, governments, public, private structures, and so on. And yet, it seems like we are polarized, and we are focusing our communications in our echo chambers, which obviously creates huge challenges, to put it nicely, when it comes to solving problems like climate change or the surge of totalitarian governments. So I invite you all to enjoy the next 15 minutes and networking break, to share ideas with each other, and to stay with us so that you can join the panel that is coming later, where 4 speakers are going to bring ideas forward and discuss from different perspectives how we can overcome these gaps and how we can use co-creation and co-design in a way that improves cities. Thank you very much. Talking here on the side, and it's so confusing. I have trouble focusing. It may seem like I'm a very focused person, but actually I'm struggling in my head. You don't know how much. Thank you so much for having stayed. I hope that you did enjoy the break and you managed to talk to other people, not only in Twitter or Facebook, but actually with real people in front of you. I have now the pleasure to present this panel, which is about tapping into the collective knowledge of citizens to co-create the city. And with me, I have 4 stellar speakers that bring experience, background, and insights from all walks of life. So let me first introduce, we have Freya Lockwood. Freya, she's with the Bristol City Council, Smart City and Innovation Manager. I'm very glad to have someone from Bristol, which is a city that I worked with, in particular with the people of KWMC here. And she's a chartered human factors specialist that brings people-centered perspective to technology-driven change. And she's developing Bristol's smart city strategy, shaping how they can use smart technologies to address city challenges, provide world-class public services, and deliver better outcomes to all. Thank you for being with us. Second, I have Nadine Kula von Bergman. She's with the University for Applied Science at Stuttgart, and she's a professor for smart urbanism in Stuttgart. Dr. Nadine is an architect and an urban designer, and she's the founder of Creative Climate Cities and the visitor professor for smart urbanism and digital strategies. She talks about urban change, and she's my methods colleague here. So thank you very much. Warm welcome to Nadine. We also have Pablo Betancourt. Pablo Betancourt is with Huawei Technologies, and he's the head of business development and government industry. And he's based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. He's a smart city solutions consultant and business development leader from Huawei, and currently dedicated to the development of industry and relationships in the West European market. Thank you, Pablo. And finally, I have Nicola Villa. When he sent me, or somebody sent me his bio, I was surprised to read that he was a veteran of the Smart City community. And then I have found out that he's been here since the first edition of the Smart City Expo. So he's MasterCard SVP for Strategic Growth, also focused in Amsterdam. He runs MasterCard's Global Center of Excellence for Government Engagement. And he's also responsible for MasterCard's government business in Europe. He has over 25 years of experience in this topic, so welcome and thank you very much. So I'll tell you what the process of this panel will look like. First, each of the speakers will have 7 minutes to address the audience, and share key insights from their work. And then we are going to share a Q&A. I have been crowdsourcing some questions from you, but please, if you have pressing questions that you do want to ask, don't be shy, bring them forward in the panel, okay? Thank you. First, I'd like to present Freya to give us her keynote.
Mara, thank you very, very much. I think my microphone has gone a little rogue, so hopefully you can all hear me.
Yeah.
I want to give you all a little cocktail shot of some of the things that we're trying to do in Bristol, not just as part of our smart city work, where we are sort of trying to tap into the collective intelligence to really try and shape what we do as a city and make the city a better place. And I've got 7 minutes to do it, so I'm going to try and cover quite a lot of ground. But I really want to take you on a journey to show where we are tapping in and co-developing, co-creating at a very systemic city level, a community level, a sort of methodological level, and really down at the sort of problem solution level, and try and share that golden thread with you. But first, I don't want to assume, even though Bristol's this amazing place and we think everybody knows about it, I just want to give you a little bit of context. So Bristol, it's not London, which makes us amazing. We're in the southwest, so we're part of a very vibrant region with an incredible tech sector, creative sector. It's a real melting pot of sort of engineering, aerospace, professional services. It's incredible, very vibrant, diverse area. There's about 450,000 people living in the city, and because of the nature of our geography, Bristol City Council's sort of sphere of influence is quite tight, and the city overspills what is our space, which is brilliant because it forces us and encourages us to work really closely with our neighbouring authorities. So we're both looking at things from a city level, and where we can and where it makes sense, how do we scale and work at a regional level? The other things I want to highlight, because it sort of taps into the communities we're wanting to engage as we start to co-create, is we're very, very diverse and international. So there's over 91 languages spoken across the city. So that alone brings just completely different sort of frames of reference and paradigms of thinking. That is incredibly valuable when you're trying to innovate around very, very complex problems. So from a smart city perspective, we've been on this journey in various guises probably for the last decade. But the thing that stayed the same all the way through is this focus on being smart and sustainable. And so we have some very challenging goals that we've set ourselves, but the bit I want to highlight here is where we're co-creating at that city level and really coalescing around this idea of how can we become this very inclusive, sustainable city of hope and aspiration, where we don't leave anybody behind, to pick up on our first keynote. And so over the sort of 2018, 2019, the City Council pulled together and convened a really diverse group of academics, community leaders, anchor institutions to try and co-create this shared city vision, and then a plan for the next 30 years of how we could collectively try and achieve that. And from a smart city innovation perspective, this has been a complete gift, because what it's meant is I can tap into that co-creation, that space, and line up my smart city strategy for how are we going to help the city use technology, data, civic innovation to try and achieve those really ambitious goals that we've set ourselves. So I just want to drop us down into that sort of next level where at a program level in one of our sort of EU flagship programs, we're trying to take this co-creation and engage at a community level. So we have our city vision, but we're also now trying to work at the individual and the community level to try and demystify a lot of this technology and start to help people make sense of what smart goods, smart mobility could mean in their everyday lives and make it meaningful to them. And so Replicate is very much focused on how can people understand these technologies so that they can save money on their energy bills. So with them, we can start to address things like fuel poverty. How can we work with people to start to sort of explore how could you lessen your environmental and CO2 impact by traveling differently, by changing the way that you use energy in your home. And it's very much with the community, and I'll start to share some of the ways that that's happening right at the very end. At a methodological level, and it's lovely that Mara is here with Ideas for Change, and I know that there's some people from Norwest Media Centre. So this is sort of pre-Replicate. A method called the Bristol Approach was developed that very much builds on community engagement methodologies to give a very structured way of engaging with communities and helping them shape that problem space and what is important to them and how you would go about co-creating solutions to that problem. And if you want to know more about that, come and find my colleagues in the Replicate program and Carolyn and Norwest Media and Mara as well. They can tell you much more about that detail. As a very individual and community level, so this is where we're looking at sort of co-creating, co-developing problems and solutions. So using community engagement champions as part of the Replicate program, the team knew that what they wanted to do was start to sort of improve the way that you sort of conveyed messages and ideas around how you could use these technologies differently. And the project team very much thought that, well, could we have a mobile vehicle that gets driven around the community and sort of starts to talk about smart homes? And when they engaged with the community champions, the message they got back is, please, not a vehicle. We don't want more congestion in our community. That's not the solution we want. And they worked with the project team and they came up with this, you can see a picture of it in the middle, this sort of very low-tech pop-up engagement space that could be moved around the community and just start to teach people, okay, well, this is what we're talking about and this is what it might mean for you. And I think it's a really lovely example of where you as a project team go in and you think you know what the priorities are and you think you know what the solution is, but actually when you start to talk to people, you go, we're wide of the mark. And I think that's something that collectively we need to be folding into more of our work, is to do that sense checking really, really early on and engage as many people. And then the last bit, and this is where the Bristol Approach was used and it worked beautifully, is around a community that had an issue with damp in their homes. And what the program team did is very much work with that community and upskill them and give them the tools and access to data and the digital know-how so that they could 3D print and use damp sensors and have a solution that they could put in their home to actually measure what the issues were and collect the data that they needed to start to solve their challenges. And what we found is very much that these different approaches started to get more diversity into that program space. It started to engage some of those harder to reach individuals and communities who wouldn't normally come and kind of engage in this sort of smart city work. And I think the program is much richer and better for it. And much more trust and engagement and ownership, which from a scaling point of view has massive implications. And so the last bit, because I'm out of time, I just want to leave with you, is our ethos is very much, we think that the smart city stuff should be shaped by the city for the city. It's not for us as the city council to be going in and saying, here's what we think your problems are, and here's what we think the challenges and the solutions should be. It needs to be co-developed right from the very start. So thank you very much for letting me share that.
Thank you very much, Freya. Our next speaker is Nadine. Thank you, Nadine.
Hello, good day. Thank you for inviting me to this great session and meeting all these like-minded people. I've already enjoyed the first part even before being on stage here. So today I will talk in my role as interim professor for smart urbanism and digital strategies at the HFT in Stuttgart. What do I mean by smart urbanism? Actually, very simple. It's the way to reach what we all have in mind as our vision of a better city, of a resilient city for the future, where everyone can participate and where everyone feel this is my city. So it's literally the way to integrate. What you see here in the background also is a little bit of an installation that cyclists from Ludwigsburg, a city in the south of Germany, did to make their society aware that there is a huge lack of bicycle routes. So how do we actually connect these people with the ones who've just recently launched the autonomous bus scheme in the city? So Ludwigsburg, I take as an example here to really run through the very short input that I was asked to give. And of course, Ludwigsburg is actually still in a very, I would say, economic, very good economic environment, and it still is facing these challenges now that everyone is facing right now. So it sits with the challenges, for instance, of having to deal with many more hot days and urban heat islands. The inner city is dying out in terms of commercial activities are obviously decreasing, and it's affecting social life. And there's also a huge problem because there's a federal road which is running right across the city. So now, if I go into the challenge with my students and I try and establish what I would call a smart city strategy, I take 4 very simple steps with them. We start and go into the field first, and we do a little bit of sensing. Then we go and try, and sensing I really mean in a very analog way, but also very digital way. So not just to collect the maps, but also to speak to the people who are actually living there. Then we go out and try and find as much data as we can, right? So the mapping part is extremely important because it will tell us where are the interconnections and where are the shared challenges, also in spatial ways. And then it's again the people who actually are from different expertises or who actually think they could offer a solution, who then shape the solution and who become actors themselves and bring forward innovative ideas themselves. And as one of the parts, this co-creation only then makes sense, because only if I have all of this together and actually made in a way that everyone can deal with that and communicate, we can actually co-create in a very high quality. So as an example, this is the data that we usually find, right? We talk about bad air quality, we talk about NOx levels, we talk about increase in rents, etc., etc. So this is what you can really verify and quantify in numbers. But more importantly, sometimes, and I think this is what we've still missed and why we've also still left a whole part of the society behind, is to ask the very simple question, what is it that you miss in the city? So these 3 students from the Film Academy in Ludwigsburg said it very simply. We don't have places for our lunchtime to interact, to socialize, and because they're in the creative business, to actually simply express what is it that we do here and what is it that we create. Now, the biggest challenge I see as a smart urbanist is to then build up this knowledge platform and to build up a so-called building kit of smart solutions, which you see on the right of the slide. And we're doing this in various modes, and I'm also a strategic advisor, so I'm also doing this as a strategy to cities. I'm collecting this online, and I'm trying to produce a knowledge database that ends up in a simple card game. So there's some prototypes around this knowledge database. We're using this at the moment. We're testing this with people, actually also working with the utilities companies right now who will use this as hopefully their future business strategy for smart district development. And most importantly, it's the phase when it's not just about collecting and bringing this together, but really taking on responsibility and saying, okay, we've got this catalog of ideas now, so what is that we need to match, and what is it that can land locally in this context? And then, as I said, the most important part of it is when everyone comes together. So these co-creation workshops need curators and neutral mediators, because we need everyone in the room, like we heard in the keynote before. We need to have this exchange. Utilities companies, bicycle initiatives, as well as municipality responsible people, etc., startups, and so on. And this methodology then helps to actually design a process where everyone feels I can buy into this process and I can offer something and I'm committing here. So for me, co-cities is nothing but inclusive cities. If we manage to create co-cities, then we don't have anything to worry about, because these diverse needs in these type of encounters will be expressed. And then again, the integration of solutions. That's what a lot of these platforms, technological platforms out there are promising. We have to test them through analog conversation and through actually making sure that we have all the expertise in the room and that we actually know how to talk to each other, not in a machine-readable way, but in a pure human way. So the most important part, after a lot of processes that I've done in various districts, when people really ask me, so what is it that was the impact? What came out in the end? Where is the physical solution? Well, I can say the biggest impact was capacity building. And that's something that every society and every city or company can take away from that. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to more conversation.
Thank you. So before I have my next speaker, I want to ask the organizers, can you activate the countdown? I'm using my phone, but okay, others, just in case, look at my phone.
You know the drill.
Pablo Betancourt from Huawei, thank you.
How can I change this here?
If you go forward.
Minutes, right?
No, someone is modifying.
Okay.
Every time.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for joining this session.
Okay.
And you know, I'm actually head of business development for Huawei in a smart city in Western Europe. I just take this position maybe 8 months. The first thing when I come to Europe is the strategy was totally maybe a mess, or maybe was a different thinking. Huawei was thinking, we have a smart city in China, so we want to develop the same in Europe. So they thought, okay, we just bring our Chinese partner to Europe. It was very difficult to enter the market. So when I joined this position, I take, okay, how can we co-create? How can we go forward to this market? Because it's different policies for different markets. So my first idea was I need to grow the ecosystem, but the ecosystem not for partners from China, the ecosystem from local partners in Europe. So that's what my main function. That's what I think. The second thing is I start to create a community. A community is of different leaders from different organizations, or even from government, from the Western Europe, from Italy, from Spain. And I have kind of joint sessions with them, but we don't talk about technology. We talk about the challenge of a smart city. And then let them talk, we listen, and also one city learn from another city. That's the key point of these communities. Why, as a technology company, we want to do that? Because, you know, sometimes we are a huge company. We want to develop some solutions. We develop 2 times to market. When we go to market, we find out maybe the city doesn't need this solution. The problem is not a closed loop. We just develop, and then the city say, no, I don't really need this. But if we have the feedback from the expert when we start the development, we can really go forward to a true smart city, because a smart city is not about the technology. It's about what's the thinking of the government and the citizens. So going forward, you know, basically smart city challenges, we have many. But if we talk about co-creation, the first problem is data integration. In the middle one, you see in the slide we have in the middle, data silos and isolated departments. And also, why this is a key problem? Because, you know, okay, we develop the technology, we have the data from this department, but how can we integrate with the data from another department so we can have a whole solution understanding what's happening in the city. Also, when we bring partners, sometimes the integration is the most difficult part. Solutions are there, but integration is the key point of doing co-creation. So, for example, this is the view of Huawei for a smart city. If you think about it, we have the sensory network. Actually, these words have been around. IoT, Internet of Things. We also have communication network, because IoT is just like your eyes. You can see, maybe you can touch, but you need a network to send this information. After you send this information, you need data. You know, I always say data is like a book. You have a closed book, you don't know what is inside. It's not very useful. It's just data. We need information. We need to open this book. To open this book, we need a brain. So we need other technologies like big data or artificial intelligence, or even intelligent operation center to help you understand what's the linkage between traffic or energy consumption. Because sometimes the department is different decisions, but we don't see as a whole in a city. Oh, sorry. So you see down there we have different KPIs for the cities. So we talk about green energy. Okay, how is green energy related also to the garbage collection, for example? We can check all those trends using intelligence operation centers or city dashboard. So for example, in city dashboard we have, okay, we just not collect data from the government, you know, we need to collect also data maybe from citizens, get citizens feedback, so we can implement different kind of, you know, applications. So the citizens say, oh, I complain about the government because in the city hall I have to wait a long time to, you know, to get my taxation or something like that. So we developed this dashboard actually in Amsterdam. Currently this dashboard is still under development, but you see, Huawei, we enable other partners to do it, but the partner is in charge of the data. Our current partner is in Amsterdam is Geodan. Anyhow, if you have time, you can go to our booth. We have this platform is live, also is getting real-time data. But the idea is not to focus in one sector. You see at the right side, we have economy, transportation, security, environment, to complete the whole view of a smart city. And also, we can get a feedback to the citizens. But you know, maybe in Europe, the view is different compared to China. In Europe, usually we take a top-down approach. Each department develops their own application, or maybe they join in the top. If we talk about China, for example, this platform is from Shenzhen city. If we talk about China, usually, I think it's different ways the government of running things, right? In China, they will make a top-down decision. So with this top-down decision, okay, it's maybe a bit different. Each department will follow. So each department can be easily integrated, the data will be integrated. For example, in Shenzhen, what they did is they create a new department, it's called Government Big Data Department. They do the collection of the data from different departments. Why? Because, you know, sometimes the police department or the firefighter departments will share data, so they need an independent department to have a different kind of data policies, because no all departments can see the other data from different departments. So that's the idea of the data integration. For example, in this slide right here is a case, just an example. Suppose you have a truck with gasoline, the truck falls. What's the risk if you have this kind of truck with gasoline? The main risk is it will explode. But if you have the technology with a video surveillance system, automatically this will be an alarm to the operator in the central station. So you can even calculate what will be the radius of the explosion of this truck if there will be this kind of problem. And also you know how many people may be working in this building. So you can calculate, okay, if there's an explosion, how many people will be affected? So you can evacuate before something happens. This is what we think is smart. But actually, Huawei, we cannot do it by ourselves. We need also many partners. In fact, if you are maybe a small company, startup, I welcome you to come to Huawei booth. You can find me. And then maybe we have different programs for partnership and also for community. So we can talk more about that, and then maybe we can do business together. Even we can maybe, you know, we finance some kind of different also approach for new and smaller companies.
Thank you. We have our final speaker now, Nicola Villa. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Brief introduction, and thanks to Mara for giving me the opportunity to talk for the next few minutes. First of all, I'm Italian, as you can hear from my accent, based in Amsterdam. Proud father of 6 kids, so that's one of my achievements. My second achievement is I've been here for 10 years, as Mara was saying. I was here in 2011 at the first edition. And if you look at what happened at the time, the conversation was about public and private partnerships. It was about technology, and in my view, it was about cities as an object. That was 10 years ago or 9 years ago, right? And if you look at what happened over the last few years, we shifted the conversation. We added a P to the public-private partnership, so we added a people component. And we're starting to think about real problems and real solutions that can be solved with technology or sometimes even without. So I will argue the conversation has shifted. One question was asked before, what makes a city smart? And one of the elements, which is quite interesting, at least to myself and to the company that I work for, is the inclusion element, right? And I will also argue that over the last 9 years, economic growth took place globally and in our cities, yet growth has not been as inclusive as we wanted it to be, right? So it is common data. We got quite a bit of evidence also with our economic analysis that the gap between the haves and haves not is basically increasing. So the economy grows, but you get a bigger gap. So the question for us has been, for a number of years, and I'm since 2 years into the company, how do we make growth more inclusive by, for example, developing financially sustainable social impact programs? In other words, can we bring the doing good that companies claim they do with the doing well, and be able to say we are going to be doing good by doing well? Right? In other words, we can't solve any of the problems on our side with philanthropy. We actually want to be able to show that we can, from an industry perspective, make money while solving the same problems. So to demonstrate that, 4 years ago, we made a commitment at the UN General Assembly to financially include 500 million people and 40 million small and micro enterprises over a period of 5 years. We are well on the way to achieving that objective. We're going to announce it in 2020 because the end of the 5 years. And what we've been able to start to think about as a consequence of that is how do we start, for example, digitizing payments the government are making into the economy, into enterprises or into people, and basically helping those people that don't have access to financial tools today basically get it through those disbursements. So we run tens of millions of disbursement activities every day to people that basically get a benefit in many parts of the world, being a health benefit, an unemployment benefit, and other type of social benefits. And by doing this, we've been starting to address a specific part of the population in many parts of the world that actually lives with less than $5 a day. So the question is, how do we demonstrate there's a viable business models for technology companies, for financial service institutions to serve these people and give them access to the tools they need, even if their income is very low. So we launched last year a program called Community Pass. We had an initial partnership with Gavi, which is the Global Alliance for Vaccine Injection, to start using our infrastructure and our network not only to enable financial transactions, that we do, billions of them every year, but also to enable access to specific services. Today, in places like Mauritania, single mothers with their child, undocumented, can walk into clinics. They can basically get their child vaccinated. They get an identity system which is distributed, so they own their data. And on top of this infrastructure that they get, which is basically a card, they also receive benefit disbursements and so on. So we're starting to create some resiliency from a financial perspective to all these people that we work on. Interesting project on co-design happened a few years ago in Latin America when we started to work with a large state-owned bank to digitize disbursement to 20 million people that were basically receiving up to the moment cash or check. And we saw, for example, how a family that will receive cash as their disbursement will tend to keep the money for the first day of the month, and they will basically spend it all. Right? So we started to think about what technology solutions do we have to basically help streamline this process. And we came up, of course, with the idea of prepaid debit cards, right? So we have millions of them around the world. We created a very beautiful product with biometric and so on, and we're trying to figure out how do we make it work into this country. We did a lot of UX, user experience research in white rooms with whiteboards, and then we decided to do something completely different. We spent 2 weeks with 16 families. Those people received the receipt, and we asked them basically what they needed. And of course, what came back from them, they told us, we don't wake up in the morning wanting to do digital payments or receive digital payments. We wake up in the morning trying to figure out how do we stay until the end of the month with enough money in our cards to be able to survive. So we completely switched around our approach from a product into a real, for sake of a word, solution. So for example, we started to involve NGOs who are now on a lot of our programs around the world, train the recipients on how to become financial resilient, how to save their money, how to manage their finances. We started to develop, in this case, a mobile app that would basically help the families, they all have a feature or a smartphone, save their money and see how much money was left during the month. We created dual cards so that a student receiving their money could use some of the money to be sent to their family, which were basically living on that subsidy as well. As well as, for example, developing loyalty schemes and point schemes. Right? So today, some of those recipients are able to buy at a discounted price foods and specific type of products which are instrumental to their survival livelihood by basically using those payments, digital payments with a discounted rate. So we basically redesigned the entire experience and the redesign program. And again, we moved back into the conversation that we were having before with Mara from personas which we draw on a whiteboard to personas with whom we spend real time and trying to figure out what their needs are and what the solution is. So now what happens? So we're working on social benefit disbursement. We're working with a lot of small and medium businesses in digitizing and helping them digitize and helping them basically get access to credit in partnership with microfinance institutions. And we're also starting to think about scale. So if you apply to the city space, last year we announced a program called City Possible, which is bringing together more than 70 cities. Some of them I see in the room, tens of companies, academic institutions. Harvard is our lead partner over there, to try to basically figure out how do we take those best practices, move beyond what I call the land of pilots that we have in cities, and start generating large-scale programs that basically demonstrate what inclusion could be into the urban space. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all the speakers for the great introductions to this panel. So in the spirit of co-creation, prior to starting, I went around and found some questions, and I would like to start with some of these questions that come from the public. And a person sitting right there asked a very interesting question that I think it's super central to this debate. We're all talking about co-creation. We have an entire theme at the Smart City Expo about co-creation. Nobody discusses that we need to put citizens at the center when designing smart city programs. Now, where does the money come from? Often, citizen engagement is the less resourced section or area of work. And we hardly ever see in the budget of a city or a company budget that is assigned to these tasks. So I'd like to kick off the discussion with your views on this. Is it true? Is it no? Is it getting better?
So if I sort of kick things off from a Bristol perspective, I think the financing and how do you collectively move forward as a city against our One City plan was something that was sort of explored really early on. So what's happened is that we've tapped into the CSR budgets of a number of institutions across the city, and the conversation, as I understand it, was very much you could all individually use those budgets to try and have an impact, or we could start to pool a very small percentage of them and create something that's now become known as a city fund that sits alongside our One City plan. And the idea is that over time that budget will grow and it can be used to finance some of the more challenging initiatives where it's going to be quite hard to sort of pull together the necessary funding, grant funding, investment. So that's the One City plan. From a smart city perspective, if there's anybody out there, I'm looking for budget because that's really challenging. And my team, for example, are predominantly externally funded. So if we can't find that sort of model of financial sort of stability, it's going to make it really difficult for us to go one way or the other. We're always going to be chasing the grants.
Thank you. Any other views on this?
Yes, maybe on our side, I will argue the question is where is the money flowing to and from, and how do we make the best use out of it? I'll give you an example. One of the problems that we've been focusing on in Poland is how do we drive digital infrastructure, and in particular for us, payments and acceptance technologies into the rural areas, right? So if you want to be able to grow a payment business, you receive your disbursement on a prepaid card or on a mobile phone, you want to be able to pay digitally into the store. And so we've been working with the central bank, with a number of banks and retailers, to allocate a small part of our volumes into what we call a cashless fund. And now we're able to basically go to, I think we enabled last year 37,000 micro businesses, which basically did not have access to these technologies to basically receive digital payments. We see a transformation in the way they're basically working, in the sense that they're able to understand exactly, for example, how much stock do they have. We are now engaging with consumer CPG, consumer product goods, multinational, Unilever is one of them, to try to understand how they can better serve and stock into those micro merchants. So the money is there. We figure out a creative way to allocate part of our industry revenue into this task. We shifted the view of some of the banks that didn't want to look at those clients as profitable, and now they look at them as profitable. And now you have microfinance institutions coming in and say, can actually give you access to credit to basically buy bigger stuff for your products. So I think it's about coming together between the public and the private sector with the citizen or the user in mind, and figure out creative ways to basically tap into the right flows, which I think are there.
Can I add a little thing that builds on that? So another area where we're starting to try and do that co-development. So in our energy sector, we sort of own an energy company. And because of the sort of climate goals that we've got and some of the energy challenges we're trying to address, we knew that we needed a lot of investment as a city that we're just not going to get from public sources. So what my colleagues in that sector have done is something called the City Leap, which is basically where we published what our challenges were, what our aspirations were, and then we put that out to the market as an open call, and we articulated, well, here's the size of the investment that we think is needed, and this is what we think we might be considering in terms of a solution. But it was very much inviting any sector to come in and go, come and have this conversation with us. And that was way more effective than we thought it was going to be. The diversity of responses we got was phenomenal. And a year later, we're now in full procurement, where we're looking for very strategic partners. So I think we tried something really novel. It's worked really well. This conversation is, how can we start to do the same around the investment we need for the smart city infrastructure? And we're just at the beginning of that journey.
So we talked about inclusiveness and we talked about stakeholder engagement. Yeah. Now I want to hear from Nadine. How do you, from a methodological point of view, how do you do co-creation while ensuring that you include those who are not the usual suspects, you take into consideration issues like age, diversity, migrant communities, gender differences, in a way that you can really bring as many points of view on board in the co-creation of the city?
Well, I first actually want to just also say a little bit about the subject you discussed before. It makes a huge...
Can you hear her?
It makes a huge difference who's the driver of the project. So it's really great to hear that this procurement process happened in such an open innovation way, and there's a city and the resources who can drive this type of processes. But what I see as a consultant is that a lot of the smart district projects are driven by private companies right now. And it makes a huge difference if it's, be it an urban regeneration project or be it a greenfield project, like who's the one who actually decides to run an international design competition for the master plan, who decides who to invite, who to come to actually process design the further development, or is it a city who's very short of resources? I mean, we know also in Germany, you will be quite surprised to see how many cities actually have such like very short budgets that it's very difficult to even pull off a smart city officer or, you know, like a governance board around that. So that makes a huge difference in one aspect, is how to balance it out. I would say all these actors and drivers can do co-creation processes, but to really reach a very high level, you need a neutral actor, and this should be even more neutral than the city government, I would here stress, and someone who's actually mediating between these interests. And there, the business model is extremely interesting, because we're not there yet. We don't have a business field out there who understands we need this kind of co-finance type of driver to make sure we meet the interests of all groups in the city.
So, thank you for that. We have seen in the past weeks, in the covers of the newspapers, the cities and, well, in particular, governments. We saw Angela Merkel asking for the creation of Gaia X. We see discussions at the European level about the need for technological sovereignty in our cities. We've gone from a situation where we allowed private companies to come into the cities and deploy technology infrastructures, and then we realized that and somehow we had lost data sovereignty. And this is a huge discussion, because co-creation requires that there is trust. And trust needs to be built between private and public and the citizenship. So I want to ask Pablo, what is your, as someone working for Huawei, who owns the technology? Who owns the data? What are the business models for cities to be able to have the cutting-edge technologies that we need to make cities more sustainable, more efficient, while at the same time not losing technological sovereignty?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. It's a good question. Maybe a bit difficult to answer, but you know, usually Huawei, we develop several technologies. Sometimes maybe people are scared of the technology. One thing is about the data privacy and those things. What we suggest is Huawei is kind of enabler. We can enable the government or enable another company to run these platforms with our technology, but the data, usually like at least Huawei, our approach is not to do the management or the governance of this data. What we do is, for example, with our partners I just mentioned, they will do the data governance and they will do the operation for the city, or sometimes they create a sub-department inside the government to operate this data. So the government can have their own trust or manage this locally. Because as a, you know, maybe a technology company, we are private and maybe, okay, oh, why you are managing our data? So we try to avoid that by just enable the partner or maybe the government, and they do the operation by themselves. That's our approach, maybe to follow more trust, and we try always not to touch the data from others. That's our mainly approach. We are transparent in that point.
Any views, Nicola, on this? You deal with very sensitive citizens' data and financial inclusion programs.
Now, first of all, we don't access the individual data. So basically, by law, by regulation, what we are allowed to see is basically a card number, basically making a spending, but we don't get access to individual data. Yet, we are in the business of authorizing transactions, billions of transactions every year. So we're starting to focus in partnership with governments in the digital identity space, right? And one of the ideas, we're about to launch a large pilot program next month. One of the ideas is to think about how do you create a distributed data model for which the citizen is in power and is in charge of their own data, and they're only able to share the specific piece of information which is functional to accessing a specific service. I'll give you an example. I've got teenager kids who are almost 18, and sometimes, as you know, they try to go to a bar and they try to basically buy a beer. And what they do is they hand over the identity card to the bartender that has their first, last name, date of birth, social security number, and address. In fact, what the bartender needs to know is whether my son is above 18 or not. So we're thinking, what if we start creating, which we have, tokenization technologies that will allow the user to share only the specific type of information, not the birth date, but I'm above 18, to access the specific service. Then information will be basically destroyed, and the citizen or the user will be in charge of their data. So we're about to launch something like this. We're publishing white paper into the space. But to me, it's a distributed world but the users are basically the owners of the information. They only share what is needed functional to a specific service.
What is it? We know that digital sovereignties, digital identities are needed to include citizens in the digital realm, but we have companies, private companies, moving in this domain. What is the view of the government, of the public sector, in terms of enabling these digital identities?
I think I would want to take it back a little step and go, there are some questions and conversations we need to have at a much earlier stage. So one of the things I did as I was sort of setting our strategic compass for this space was, how do we create the space and the focus to understand how do we want to use these technologies and what impact will that have on the sort of interface between sort of civic and public. And we've sort of called this responsible innovation. And within that space is a recognition that we don't really have a full and rich understanding around this data piece. So there was, in the UK, there's something called the Government Select Committee. And they published a report recently that basically highlighted that as governments, we don't actually understand how the public think we should be using their data in terms of sharing it, collecting it, storing it, what we do with it. And then the flip side of that is for the data that we do have, the public don't actually understand what we're doing with it. And so one of the very first stages, and it's an initiative that we're looking at how we get off the ground, is to go and have those conversations with the city. And in an ideal world, it wouldn't just be Bristol doing this, and we were looking at where we would be partnering with other cities so that we could start to get a much better understanding of what should we be doing. So there's a whole load of things that we can do because of technology, because of law, but what should we do? What's the ethical, transparent? And I think that very much plays to your point.
Which touching to compliances, regulation, and all the process infrastructure need to build around new technologies which have been deployed without that.
Nadine?
When talking about the trust issue and really allowing for a co-creative process, it's very interesting. We often also now, again, we concentrate and we rather fear the idea that the data that we give or that is actually being processed somehow is misused or that type of a mistrust. But from a design and integrated urban design point of view, what is much more important is to really steer this conversation towards the interface which allows for accessing this type of data. So it's really a design question in terms of who can I invite, who feels capable to actually engage with, be it online tool or also with the type of workshop that I'm offering. Like I've run a couple of engagement workshops. I wouldn't call them participation workshops because it's really about stakeholders, let's say, utilities company, talking to someone who runs a district office, who really runs a cultural initiative, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you give them as really the capacity to be able to talk to each other? Literally vocabulary, glossary, but also in the online and in the interactive ideas and tools is how do you make them to access this type of data? This is, I think, a much bigger challenge. And we tend to discuss just what is really on the back end of.
So I know that I have to, we have run out of time, and I know that I have to stop this conversation, although I have a lot of questions for you. But I would like to finish with a little sentence from each of you. The theme of the Smart City Expo this year is Cities Made of Dreams. And I want from you a little statement on what is that city that you dream of? What is a key element that you can do to achieve the city that you dream of? Nicola?
So the city that I dream of is a city that we don't call smart anymore, as if there were smart and no smart cities. It's a city which is inclusive, where we also start stopping using the word customers or citizens, and we speak about people. There is a lot of undocumented people, right, in our European cities, in American cities, in the developing world, they basically need to get the same access to the same type of services and infrastructure and program as the citizens. So to me, it's a city of people, it's an inclusive city, and doesn't matter if it's smart or not.
Thank you. Rodrigo? Pablo, perdón.
Well, for me, smart cities dream. Let me think. I think for smart cities, I don't think as a smart city. I just think as I'm a happy guy. I like people to be happy. If we can maybe create environments where people can join together and maybe become more sociable. Because now we have all these social networks, but the problem is we have social networks, but we don't see each other. So maybe some space where people can also go out and maybe enjoy life. Maybe when I was just a little children. That's my view. Because now we are becoming so smart, so digital. But at the end, we are not meeting people. We are not talking. That's my maybe different point of view.
Thank you, Nadine.
So I would really hope for any type of city to be a city of choice, so that everyone who lives in a city can decide in whatever phase he or she or it is in to move from the margin to the center and vice versa, and to choose the type of occupation, the type of mobility service, or the type of school for the next generation. So I hope we're also thinking towards the city of choice more.
Thank you, Freya.
So for Bristol, this is a really interesting conversation because we kind of captured and sort of articulated what our dream city is, which is it's a city that is about hope and aspiration. It's about inclusive prosperity where no one's left behind. And when I first sort of engaged with that statement, what I liked is it's about how we want people to feel and focusing on how we as a sort of municipality and with our partners, how can we create a space where people can live their best lives? And I really love that idea of choice. And I think the thing that I sort of feel quite strongly about is how do we shift the conversation from just being about cities, and how do we start to be more inclusive with our rural communities and get a better balance between the two?
So you've heard this, I've heard it too. The cities of our dreams are cities that are inclusive, are enjoyable, with more opportunities for human interactions in public space, are cities of choice where people can choose how to live their lives better, with freedom, with opportunities. So as we've said this, I'm sure that we commit to delivering the cities, to building the cities together, and hopefully following co-creation approaches. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us.